BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, Nedheads. Hello, Black Box Battalion. Today is Thursday, another Dahlia Thursday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? On Thursdays, I talk to you guys about the Black Dahlia murder, one of the most horrific crimes in American history. And in this episode, I will be discussing the new book Sisters in Death by Eli Frankel, as well as responding to his appearance on the Seth Roshevsky podcast. And you guys know the drill. You can hit the like button if you want, subscribe if you haven't, and drop a comment down below if you have something to say about the Black Dahlia. For larger things, you can send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And I am your host, Black Box Ned. Now, I talk about multiple subjects here on Black Box Online Radio, and I follow different unsolved mysteries, such as the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, D.B. Cooper, and you're listening to Dahlia Thursday right now. And this is the newest case for me, but even in my short time following the Black Dahlia mystery, I've definitely seen some promotions and advertisements for the book Sisters in Death by Eli Frankel. It's a book that's been heavily promoted, and it is now finally available. This episode is being recorded on October 30th, and the book came out on October 28th. But there definitely were a lot of appearances made by Eli Frankel and a lot of advertisements going around, and it seems like he wants the book to do fairly well. But let's see what this book is all about. It's called Sisters in Death, the Black Dahlia, the Prairie Heiress, and Their Hunter. And what this is going to do is, it's going to say that there was a murder in 1941 in the Midwest where a woman named Layla Welsh was murdered, and she is the Prairie Heiress on the cover of the book, and of course Elizabeth Short is the Black Dahlia. Now, Eli Frankel is going to try and make a connection between these two murders and say that they were committed by the same person, and his name is Carl Balsiger. And he is someone who is not a new suspect in the world of the Black Dahlia. Even in the short months that I've spent covering the story, I was really quite surprised when I learned that his suspect was Carl Balsiger, an already established suspect, or someone who has definitely been mentioned in Black Dahlia discussions. There's even a chapter about Carl Balsiger in the Black Dahlia in Hollywood, which anyone can read online for free. But let's have a look at this book here, Sisters in Death. First, I'm just going to share Eli Frankel's own description. Who killed the Black Dahlia? In this eye-opening shocker, an award-winning true crime researcher and Hollywood insider finally solves the greatest and most gruesome murder of the 20th century, just before its 80th anniversary. And when Eli Frankel does interviews, he talks a lot about his media background. He worked for the E! Network in entertainment news, and I think that it shows. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying I think it shows. I think he has somewhat of a polished media presentation style. He seems like he has definitely practiced a lot, and he has prepped himself for appearing in front of the camera. In January of 1947, the bisected body of Elizabeth Short, completely drained of blood, was discovered in an undeveloped lot in Los Angeles. Its gruesome mutilations led to a firestorm of publicity, citywide panic, and an unprecedented number of investigative pasts led by the LAPD. All dead ends. The Black Dahlia murder remained an unsolved murder for over 70 years. 6 years earlier, and 1,600 miles away, another woman's life had ended in a similarly horrific manner. Layla Welsh was an ambitious, educated, popular, and socially connected beauty. Though raised modestly on a prairie farm, she was the heiress to her Kansas City family's status and wealth. On a winter morning in 1941, Layla's butchered body was found in her bedroom, bearing unspeakable trauma. One victim faded into obscurity, and the other became notorious. Both had in common a killer whose sadistic mind was a labyrinth of dark secrets. Eli Frankel reveals for the first time a key fact about the Black Dahlia crime scene that was never been shared to the public, that leads inexorably to the stunning identification of a criminal who was at the same time amateurish and fiendish, skilled and lucky, sophisticated and brutish, drawing on newly discovered documents, law enforcement files, interviews with the last surviving participants, the victim's own letters, trial transcripts, military records, and more. This epic true crime saga puts together the missing pieces of a legendary puzzle. Well, that is a giant introduction to the book, Sisters in Death. And I'm going to play a clip in just a second of Eli Frankel. He appeared on the Seth Roshevsky podcast, which is a new program that I have just discovered. And last week I told you guys that I was going to talk about Eli Frankel's appearance on their show this week. And at the time, last week, they had 170,000 views on the episode with Eli Frankel. Now it's up to 280,000 at the time of this recording. So I absolutely congratulate Seth Roshevsky on his success, as well as Eli Frankel. I mean, I do congratulate them on this episode because it looks like it's doing very well. But there are going to be some things that are not included in the video clip that I'm going to play, and that is that one of the major reasons why Eli Frankel believes that the same killer attacked Elizabeth Short in 1947 and Layla Welsh in 1941 is the famous story of the rose. I've even talked to you guys about the book Black Dahlia, Red Rose by Pugh Eatwell, and it's that Elizabeth Short had a famous tattoo of a rose that was cut out of her body. And there was an incision made into her leg, and it was cut out in what Eli Frankel describes as a bell shape or a horseshoe shape. And when Layla Welsh was murdered in 1941, a similar cut was made to the leg, where the same bell shape and horseshoe shape was cut into the victim's leg. And also that there was a certain effort from the killer to leave things behind at the crime scene, such as the pound of flesh that was cut out. And I say that with Layla Welsh because he describes that one very carefully as that a 1-inch thick portion of flesh was cut out from her leg in the bell shape. With Elizabeth Short, was that part of flesh left behind? I have not read this in official documentation. I have not read this from a scholarly source. But in my short explorations into the Black Dahlia case, and as I said, this is the newest segment for Black Box Online Radio, in my short explorations, I found that the Black Dahlia rose tattoo was skinned, rolled up, and inserted into her anus. I mean, that definitely is floating around on the internet. There are a lot of conflicting things about the autopsy that I've already encountered in my journey following the story. And once again, I talk about the Black Dahlia every Thursday, and if you want to follow along with these discussions, you can hit the like button and subscribe one more time. And ultimately, though, I fully admit that I am a student of this case rather than a master, and it's an ongoing process. But I'm going to play this clip from Eli Frankel on the Seth Roshevsky podcast, and then let's have a response.
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, if they'd had CCTV cameras on any of the streets around the empty weed-strewn lot where Beth Short had been left, they would have been able to determine the make and model of the car, license plates. I mean, that would have been solved in a second.
Sure.
With Layla Welsh, same thing. You have it's an amazing story, the Layla Welsh murder, and the details are baffling because the chances of getting caught were so high in that murder that it's almost shocking somebody was willing to take the risk, which says a lot about who the killer is. This isn't a random slaying. This isn't somebody who's on the street and sees this beautiful girl getting out of a car and walking into a house and then decides, well, I'll crouch in the bushes and wait for a little bit and then I'm going to murder her. This was somebody who was obsessed with her, who was determined to destroy her, and was willing to take those risks, and likely had been waiting and kind of scouring the backyard and finding places to hide and how to not be seen in the days leading up to the murder. So he entered through the backyard, and this isn't just like a regular suburban backyard. The houses there, like I said, are extremely tight. The police counted no less than 36 windows which were surrounding the house from other neighbors' homes that looked directly into where the killer was waiting in the hours before the murder, and where the window was that he slipped in and out. And in fact, in some of the other houses, you can look through the kitchens, the living rooms. I've been all throughout this neighborhood. You can look through bedrooms and you can see directly into Leila Welsh's bedroom. So it is a really improbable place to commit a murder like this. And what's intriguing about the murder investigation is that this killer didn't just leave some evidence behind. He left an entire trail of evidence. It's almost as if there was too much evidence left behind that overwhelmed the case. Usually killers try to leave as little evidence as possible. For instance, he stole a T-shirt from a neighbor's garage, which he used to stop the bleeding or to try to stop the blood flow from getting on him. He was very averse to blood. So he left behind this T-shirt that he had used. He left behind the track hammer that he had used to kill her inside the room. He left behind the knife that he had used to kill her. He had literally stabbed her, pushed it into the ground right outside her window. He abandoned the gloves he had been wearing. And interestingly, and I think this actually plays a much bigger part into the investigation and who this person was, and police even initially realized, and I talk about that in the book as well, he left behind the piece of flesh that he had carved out of her body. There were also myriad blood trails. There was a pool of blood within underneath the eave of a garage outside that had snow around it, and it had cleaned his hands in the snow. There's a bunch of other evidence he left behind as well, including the newspaper that he used to wrap around the materials of murder that he used, his implements of murder, the tools, and much more. This was a guy who literally abandoned everything he brought with him to commit this murder. Everything he had planned and put together, his murder kit, he left behind in full view, which is very, very unusual. Similarly, in the Elizabeth Short murder, the killer mailed in a bunch of her personal belongings that he had had. He started communicating with the newspapers at the time and eventually the police, and sent in all this evidence, and had also left evidence within her body when it was discovered. So I think in both cases, you see a killer who sort of, again, he makes so many mistakes, and, to his credit, luckily gets, for his luck, not ours, but is able to slip through these, myriad traps that have been set for him, in kind of conducting these murders.
And one more time, that was Eli Frankel on the Seth Roshevsky podcast. I don't know about you guys, but when I was listening to that episode, just watching it live, I was actually watching it on my TV the other night, and for me, the power grid went off. It's like the alarm bells started ringing. It's almost as if somebody just listed off 15 differences between two different true crime cases, and then decided to say, hey, look how similar they are. And I was just sitting back thinking, Are you serious? And I'm not trying to knock anybody's research or anybody's perspective on the case. I just thought, based on everything that he said in that clip right there, that these cases sound extraordinarily different. For starters, the murder of Leila Welsh was a home invasion, and we don't know if there was an invasion or an intruder that murdered Elizabeth Short or abducted her. Elizabeth Short was last seen about 5 days before she was murdered. So, we don't necessarily know her whereabouts and her movements, but what I can share with you is that in the majority of theories, it's not that Elizabeth Short was in somebody's home and she was abducted. Instead, it's that Elizabeth Short was lured to a place where the killer attacked her. Okay, that's just kind of the majority opinion, the popular opinion, and I just wanted to share that in contrast, but I fully admit that it is an unsolved case and we do not know. Some of the things that I think are so much more important to discuss are the way that the killers went about this. The murderer of Leila Welsh, as you just heard, assembled what's called a kill kit. Very famously, Ted Bundy was a kill kit killer, and it seems that Brian Koberger, who killed the Idaho Four, was also a kill kit killer, although Brian Koberger was not a serial killer because he was interrupted. He most likely would have gone on to become one. But this person assembled a kill kit using newspapers nonetheless, not with a backpack like they might do in the 21st century or the late 20th century, but they apparently wrapped the killing tools in newspaper and left that behind. That person brought a knife and attacked Layla Welch with it and left it behind. That person wore gloves and left them behind. This is 1941, so they weren't going to be concerned with things like DNA evidence. But in all seriousness, I mean, I'm just thinking, this sounds extremely different than the Black Dahlia Avenger of 1947, because with the Black Dahlia Avenger, were things like that left behind at the crime scene? Well, there's a difference. Elizabeth Short's body was not found where she was murdered for all intents and purposes. Elizabeth Short's body was found at a dump site. Her body was transported, and the person didn't leave the killing tools scattered around. Completely different. And here is the biggest thing. This is the biggest reason why I wanted to talk to you guys about this and share that specific clip. The difference that I'm seeing is that the Black Dahlia Avenger went to a much greater effort to destroy the evidence. The Black Dahlia Avenger scrubbed Elizabeth Short's body clean. Her body was cut in half, the blood was drained out, and that might have been to destroy evidence, but also because it made her easier to transport, and there was a lower likelihood of blood evidence being left behind in a car if her blood had been drained. But really, the fact that this person went to such great efforts to destroy any type of physical evidence to be traced back to him sounds extremely different than the person who killed the Prairie Heiress. And here's another example of this. And I mean, I really do not think that these things should be downplayed. One thing that Eli Frankel is leaving out in that clip is that, yes, there was an envelope that was mailed in with Elizabeth Short's belongings. And even Larry Harnish, who is the ultimate skeptic in the Black Dahlia world, has stated that he thinks that that's authentic. He believes that that letter actually came from the killer. But what's the difference between somebody leaving items behind at the Layla Welch crime scene and somebody mailing in Elizabeth Short's belongings? The envelope that was mailed in was doused in either kerosene or gasoline or some type of similar substance to once again destroy the physical evidence. The person who murdered Elizabeth Short was way more methodical. The person who murdered Elizabeth Short was way more careful. Now, it seems like there is a certain amount of precaution that was taken with the Prairie Heiress murder. You heard some things about how the person was using a t-shirt to try and stop the bleeding and the gushing because they didn't want blood on their clothes. Okay, there is a certain methodical nature. And one thing that Eli Frankel would say later on in the interview is he actually believes that both murderers just got lucky and that there's a certain amount of luck and fortune on their part, poor investigative procedures and so on. And I think that that's a fair thing to say. But with the Black Dahlia Avenger, I just think there is a much greater effort in the methodical nature. The murderer of the Prairie Heiress was somewhat methodical. The murderer of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia Avenger, was way more methodical. So ultimately, that's where I stand on the issue. And maybe Eli Frankel is right. Maybe it was Carl Balsiger who committed both crimes. And I'm just giving my own immediate response. But I kid thee not, when I was watching that on the television, it just really stood out to me as something very, very striking. And also to give credit where credit is due, to talk about the similarities now between the Prairie Heiress murder and the Black Dahlia murder. It seems that both of them were very specific targets. One thing that I agree with Eli Frankel is this doesn't seem like someone who's just an opportunistic predator who's just hiding in the bushes and waiting for the moment to attack, or the type of predator that's going to go after a woman. Doesn't really matter who it is, he's just going to target a woman. What it sounds like is, with both crimes, is that they were very specific targets, especially the Short murder, where this is somebody who had some type of dark, unhealthy obsession with the victims, and that he is choosing them for a very specific reason. But because these are unsolved cases, we don't know what those reasons are. We don't necessarily know everything that the killer was thinking. But I told you guys that I also wanted to look at Eli Frankel's new book, Sisters in Death, which you can get on Amazon as well as anywhere books are sold. And there are a couple things that I would like to read to you guys here. This is more or less the beginning. Los Angeles has no history. It's a statement of undisputed fact repeated over and over. Always it makes my skin crawl. The layers of sediment between LA's asphalt and stucco may reveal a more nuanced saga than the excavation sites in Europe or even the East Coast cities. Los Angeles has no history, huh? Wow, what a way to begin a book, Eli. The Black Dahlia is inescapable in Hollywood. Were the case still casually mentioned at dinners and business meetings like so many others, I was drawn in at an early age by the mystery of Elizabeth Short, the film noir world she inhabited, and the cast of characters with whom she interacted. But something gnawed at me. Nearly every account begins with the discovery of the horrifying bisected body at 10:50 a.m. on January 15th of 1947 in full public view, just inches from the sidewalk. What about all the other passerbys who use that heavily trafficked street in the hours after sunup? How could someone not have seen such a prominent corpse until mid-morning? Only one person could have possibly known the answer to that, and I wasn't even sure if she was alive. And, he has shared this in his other public appearances. Not only did I watch the Seth Roshevsky interview with him, I also saw him on Crawlspace, and I've read some of the promotional materials online for Sisters in Death. And Eli Frankel had the opportunity to interview Betty Bersinger, the woman who found Elizabeth Short's body, and she actually provided some details here that he will get to later on in his book, about how originally her body was not right up against the sidewalk. It was 12 to 16 feet away from the sidewalk in the grass, meaning that her body had been moved at some point after Betty Bersinger saw it for the first time. Betty Bersinger will be walking with her daughter, who was 3 years old at the time. She's pushing a stroller, and then she's going to pass Elizabeth Short's body. Originally, she thinks that it's a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, she realized that it was a person's body. And one of the things that really surprised a lot of people, it even surprised me, so full credit to Eli Frankel for this one, is that wouldn't more people have noticed her body there on the sidewalk? Because if you do go look at the crime scene photos, I don't share them here on Black Box Online Radio, not the up-close ones anyway, but you can find them easily available online. There are even YouTube videos that have the crime scene photos. And her body is very, very close to the sidewalk. And you would think that other people would have seen by. And there's even a report that there were boys on their bicycles riding up and down the street, and they should have been able to see her. But if her body were 12 to 16 feet away from the sidewalk in the grass, that might make things a little bit more difficult. So this is one of the points that Eli Frankel is going to try and argue in his book, that the body was moved at some time after Betty Bersinger saw it. Now, what happened there? Well, we aren't necessarily sure, and of course, Eli Frankel is going to connect this to his suspect, Carl Balsiger, and you might be noticing that I'm not talking too much about the suspect, but I would love to do that in a future episode of Dahlia Thursday. But let's keep going here with the book, Sisters in Death by Eli Frankel. Finally, I discovered a tiny announcement in a 1936 Kansas City newspaper that placed one of the Black Dahlia's long-overlooked lead suspects in the same room as another murder victim who had been killed in an eerily similar circumstance. If it were a mere coincidence, it at least begged further investigation. Oh, absolutely. I do agree with that. Like, if you find a lead, or if you find that there's something suspicious, you can investigate it. You can look into it. You do not have to dismiss something as merely a coincidence just because it seems improbable. Now, there's a total difference between looking into something and writing a book about it. So let's see how the story is going to play out. The hunt to track down the details of the suspect's life was a long, painstaking road, requiring travel to Missouri and Kansas and thousands of primary resources. While the life story of the perpetrator was a central focus, it was the stories of the victims, both those who survived and those who didn't, that truly captured my attention. Upon the discovery of her body in 1947, Elizabeth Short was quickly transformed into the Black Dahlia, a role that she was never suited to play, but into which she would nonetheless be cast by the press and eager to create a character. Well, I mean, I'm sure he's aware of this, but Elizabeth Short received the nickname the Black Dahlia while she was currently alive, and that was because of her black hair mostly looked like a dahlia flower. So that was something that was not given to her by the media, although there are countless sources out there, there are even other books out there, like Black Dahlia Red Rose, which state that she received the nickname from the media. And maybe it's one of the reasons why this case is a little bit more popular than other true crime cases. It's a partnership of the gruesome, horrific nature of the crime and the nickname the Black Dahlia. It's definitely something that is going to get people's attention. Now, the next segment here in Eli Frankel's book is called The Key Question. It is one of the most infamous moments in the annals of true crime, an encounter of such a stark and shocking contrast that it has become the de facto introduction to nearly every narration of the greatest cold case in United States history. Some of the details may subtly shift between each retelling, but the story always remains the same and never ceases to grab attention. On the morning of January 15, 1947, in the quaint working-class neighborhood of Leimert Park in south-central Los Angeles, 27-year-old Betty Bersinger set out for a walk a few blocks away from her home at a nearby commercial district, where she intended to get a pair of shoes fixed. And if I recall, the pair of shoes was actually for her husband, but she was going out to run an errand all the same. Accompanying her was her 3-year-old daughter Anne. On a regularly traveled route down Norton Avenue, Betty would pass a weed-strewn lot 2 blocks in length. Some versions have Anne playing in the weeds and then suddenly crying out for her mother's attention, and other versions have Betty pushing Anne in the stroller, stopping abruptly when she sees it. She then turns, screaming in terror, to the nearest house. Well, I mean, yes, that does seem to be what happened, that she saw the body. As I said, she thought it was a mannequin, but then she realized it was a human. So she didn't have a cell phone in 1947, so she went to somebody's house to alert them so that they could call the police. But I really haven't heard this story that her daughter Anne was playing in the weeds and found the body. Everything else that I've heard is that Betty Bersinger was doing exactly what we said already, that she was pushing the stroller, and she is the one who saw the body of Elizabeth Short, not that her daughter was out playing and she found it. So I'm not even sure the origin of that exact scene. But let's keep going here. The body had been drained of blood and scrubbed clean with a coconut fiber brush, appearing stark white in the sun in contrast to the victim's jet black hair. Photographs of the horrendous scene were cleaned up for newspapers, and a pretty face in repose painted over the ghastly carved cheeks, and a blanket artistically added to cover the bisection. Though the mutilations would not be publicly viewed, the description in print was enough to grip the imagination of the Angelinos. I hope I'm saying that right. The people of Los Angeles, are they called Angelinos? And propel the story to the front pages of the newspapers across the country. Absolutely, it's a horrific crime. I openly tell you guys every Thursday here on Dahlia Thursday that this is one of the most horrific crimes in American history, and there's a type of shock value that has been shared by the media. There's a certain exploitative nature of this case, and sometimes mainstream media publications like to run wild with stories, and they have something that they can capitalize on. They had a nickname, the Black Dahlia. They had these horrific crimes. They had the stark contrast between her black hair and her white skin because her body had been drained from blood. All of these elements came into play, and this is why this case perhaps has received more media attention than other cases. But as you heard, with the details of the Prairie Heiress murder, that is also an equally horrific case. So, I mean, if anything, we should give credit to Eli Frankel for helping to popularize the story of Layla Welsh, because he's also trying to bring more attention to a different unsolved mystery and a different unsolved cold case. But let's keep going here. The body wasn't discarded in a back alley or left in a car or hidden in a home. It had been laid out in the grass mere inches from a heavily trafficked public sidewalk. A streetcar line emptied hundreds of passengers daily just a block away. The two halves of the body had been carefully placed, lined up, and posed for public view on Norton Avenue. No doubt the location had been chosen for a reason. The empty block in the early morning hours would have allowed the killer a modicum of privacy when the body was laid out, but by sunup the display of the bisected body, heavily tortured corpse, inches from the sidewalk, guaranteed an audience and maximum shock value. Whoever did this wanted the world to see their work. Betty Bersinger would be the person chose to discover that work. The press could not have found a more ideal first witness for the horrifying display. Well, and this ties back to some of the things that we were talking about on the previous episodes of Dahlia Thursday, that what really was the killer trying to do? Was the killer trying to humiliate Elizabeth Short, or was he just trying to send a message to the world that I killed this person and she's trash and she means nothing to me? Is he just trying to insult her post-mortem? It's most likely a combination of both, and you really find that with a lot of these psychopathic serial killers, that they want revenge on a specific person, and they're going to do that for the sake of domination, for the sake of their own power. This is most likely a very personal killing, where somebody had a specific issue with Elizabeth Short, and they wanted revenge, and they wanted to not only treat her like she was an object, but also they wanted the entire world to know that they had killed her, and they wanted to humiliate her. But as I've talked about on a previous episode of Dahlia Thursday, that there was this possibility that the killer might have wanted to hide her identity, but he didn't necessarily put through very strong efforts to conceal Elizabeth Short's identity, and ultimately she was identified via fingerprints. So, at 11:05 a.m., Betty Bersinger's phone call came into the complaint line at the LAPD. At 11:07 a.m., a 390 police scanner, code for intoxicated individual passed out, was dispatched on the radio. Well, that's kind of crazy that they would send out a radio signal for an intoxicated person when there's a body that's been bisected in the grass, but I digress from that. At 11:09 a.m., Perkins and Fitzgerald arrived at Norton Avenue, and 5 minutes later, at approximately 11:14 a.m., Car 34 radioed LAPD's University Division. At 11:30 a.m., Harry Hansen and Finis Brown, the two homicide detectives who would lead the investigation, arrived at the packed crime scene. Newspaper reporters and photographers had already assembled en masse, stepping around the body while taking notes and preparing to breathlessly report and print on the radio every detail of the scene. And this is something that's even discussed in John Gilmore's book Severed about the Black Dahlia, that the media did arrive there very early, and when the media does this, they trample the crime scenes and they destroy evidence. They contaminate the crime scenes, especially for things like footprints, especially with things that the killer may have left behind. And it's a very, very big disservice, because you would really hope that there would still be some journalists out there that are trying to get the truth, not only to write some type of twisted, sensational story, but that's what it seems to be. But as close as reporters got to the body, much information as they pried out of the police, investigators were only able to hold back three crucial details. The police would use these pieces of information in question to identify potential suspects and have something. Only the killer would know the answer. Two of those questions and their answers were eventually revealed, but one remains secret to this day. The police referred to it as the key question. Well, if you want to be mysterious, that's one way to do it. A 1971 Los Angeles Times article about Harry Hansen states, within this group of questions was one that was relevant, yet so bizarre and remote that its answer was beyond a wild guess, but obvious to the killer. Police called it the key question and will admit that only when some fact about the condition, appearance, or attitude of Elizabeth Short's body at the time was discovered. Hansen goes on to deny that a rumored marking on her body or any rearrangement of her organs was the basis of the key question. Well, you definitely have my attention, and if this is going to be something that's not about marks on the body or the arrangement of the organs, what else could it be? Though he never revealed any more details, Hansen left a very important clue in the description of the key question. His choice words were, "At the time it was discovered is the giveaway." Reporters and photographers stood inches away from the body, and they witnessed and cataloged every aspect of the condition, appearance, and attitude. If there was something about the condition of the victim's body that only the killer would have known, then some aspect of the positioning of the body shifted between the discovery and the moment reporters first arrived. And this is ultimately going to be the thing that Eli Frankel says that he has discovered. And, I'm not giving away any secrets from his book. He did share this stuff in his interviews, that perhaps in between the time that Betty Bersinger saw the body and when the body was found, it was moved to a different location. Betty discovered the body at 11:09 a.m., and officers Fitzgerald and Perkins arrived at the scene at 11:19 a.m. What happened in that crucial 9-minute gap between the arrival of the first and second set of officers that would alter the condition, appearance, or attitude of the body? The answer lies with Betty Bersinger, the woman who first stepped into the story of the Black Dahlia murder and would be the last to leave it, having outlived every other participant until her death in October of 2023. And, this really seems like what it's going to be is that the body was moved to a different location. And, I'll just get it right here. But if Betty Bersinger saw the torso lying 12 feet away in the weeds, how and when did it move to the sidewalk? So this appears to be something that maybe what Eli Frankel is insinuating is that the killer saw Betty Bersinger identify the body, or he saw Betty Bersinger looking at the body and then was able to get closer and then move the body during that 9-minute gap. That's a very extreme statement. Very extreme indeed. But is that the secret question, the key question that everybody's been talking about, something that only the killer would know? And I would really like love to hear what you guys think about that. Moreover, I also want to let you guys in on some things, and that is that this book, Sisters in Death, has been heavily promoted. It has been widely discussed around the podcast circuit, but it has also received a lot of criticism. And one person who has criticized this book has been Larry Harnish. He has been following the Black Dahlia case for 30 years, and he just released a new episode of his bi-monthly AMAs. He does one AMA about the Black Dahlia and one AMA about George Hodel, a suspect in the Black Dahlia. And the George Hodel one came out this week. And ultimately, I think that Larry Harnish is pretty much calling Eli Frankel a fraud. And you can read that in his articles on the LA Daily Mirror. He has a couple blog posts about Eli Frankel, and he has said multiple times that Eli Frankel has a suspect named Carl Balsiger, who he claims was responsible for the Black Dahlia murder and the Prairie Heiress murder. But he says that Carl Balsiger could not have committed the Prairie Heiress murder because he was stationed out of state in the military at the time. Now, I'm not doubting either one of these people. He has never gone into specific detail in any of the episodes that I have watched as to how he has obtained this information, or to have these exact specific points that Eli Frankel's suspect was out of the state when the Prairie Heiress murder occurred. Because, in the military, people can go on leave. Sometimes somebody might have gone home for a different reason. Or I have not heard the specific explanations. But he says that Carl Balsiger has mostly been debunked and removed and eliminated as a suspect in the Prairie Heiress murder. So that makes one question the whole thing. And Larry Harnish is not afraid to call out somebody whom he disagrees with, or say that somebody is fudging the facts. And this is some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about on Zodiac Monday. And right now, I'm getting away from the Black Dahlia, and I just want to share something with you guys that is a general true crime statement. And what Larry Harnish said on a recent AMA was that sometimes a person can view a true crime case as their intellectual property, and then they don't care if they're putting out false information, if it fools the competition, where they're thinking, I know the truth. So now I'm going to say something that isn't true to other people, and they're going to be the ones who have the false information. I have the truth, and they don't. And again, that's going to be something that I'm going to be working into other episodes here on Black Box Online Radio, because it's very important to keep in mind. And I wish that we could just say that everybody's going to be honest, or somebody's going to put out a claim and a theory, and they're going to do it with pure intention in their hearts. But that doesn't happen all the time. And also, people will ignore critical details. And I also want to be extremely clear about something. I did not call Eli Frankel a fraud. Larry Harnish did, and he wrote it in his article for the LA Daily Mirror in his blog post. He made those statements. So I'm going to approach Sisters in Death with a little bit of skepticism, and I want to find out the truth. I want to know, who do I side with, who is telling the truth and who isn't. And I'm going to do a future episode about Carl Balsiger as a Black Dahlia suspect. In this one, I really wanted to use it as a prelude for the book, Sisters in Death, by Eli Frankel. And you've heard a lot in this episode. You've heard about the similarities and differences between the two murders. You've heard a lot about how the killers may have acted. You've heard a lot about this secret detail that the body of Elizabeth Short may have been moved during a 9-minute window. Well, what do you think about all that? Do you think the body was actually moved? Or do you think that something else was taking place? Please let me know what you think about any of the information that has been discussed here. If you have already read Sisters in Death, please feel free to give your comments in the section down below. If you think that Carl Balsiger is an excellent suspect for the Black Dahlia case, please give your feedback down below. I would love to read it. And moreover, I'm going to be doing that future episode on him, so please stay tuned to Dahlia Thursday. And in addition to liking and subscribing, you can also check out some of the other content here on Black Box Online Radio. As I said, every Monday I do a segment about the Zodiac Killer. On Tuesdays, I've been talking about the disappearance of Maura Murray. On Wednesdays, about Jack the Ripper. Dahlia Thursday, which you're listening to right now. And, of course, there is Cooper Friday, talking about D.B. Cooper, which will be coming out tomorrow. And this show is available for free downloads anywhere you get your podcasts, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you can find it under the names Black Box Podcast or Black Box True Crime. You can also get the images that you see going by on the screen. They are archived at True Crime Designs on Facebook, and even if you don't want to download them, you can just follow a True Crime page, True Crime Designs, on Facebook. And I also release shorts and reels Monday through Friday on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. YouTube, of course, is Black Box Online Radio, but on Facebook, I have a Black Box Online Radio page, and on Instagram, blackboxned88. And if you want to support all of these efforts, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com, buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88, and that allows you to make a donation or a contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. And, one more time, the book is Sisters in Death by Eli Frankel. That's all for me now, and I will see you tomorrow for a new episode about D.B. Cooper. Until next time.